Much is said about how to be a good and godly husband once you're a husband, but what I'm interested in is the stage before that. You see, I went about this completely differently. I acted like I was a husband even before I was married, and I want to share with you why I did that, how I did that, and why I think that's a good way to approach your single years. Now, to give you some backstory, when I was about 13 years old, I read this book by Vodi Bakum called What He Must Be, and this was basically a book by Vodi Bakum laying out what a man must be in order to date and marry his daughter. Now, this was a convicting book for me. I was pretty much like freaked out of my mind after I read this, to be honest with you, because I did not measure up in any way. Financially, fell short while I was 13 years old. Spiritually, I fell short. I was 13 years old, but at the same time, this lit a fire underneath me because I had this deep desire to get married. Now, that desire led me to lead a very different life, to live a life where I acted as a husband even before I was married. Now, that concept, that phrase might not make any sense to you, but hopefully it'll make sense as I explain how I did that. The truth is, I wanted to love my wife even before I knew her. I wanted to love my wife even before I knew her. That concept is very confusing for us in our modern age because we believe love is just a feeling. It's just warm and fuzzies. But love is an action. It's a choice. And so if I want to love my wife even before I knew her, then I would need to act out of love for her, make the sacrifices that were necessary in order to fulfill the mission that I wanted to accomplish, which was not only get married, but lead a life that was God glorifying in my family life, to provide for her, to protect her, to lead her well. These were all things on the top of my mind. And so these are the decisions that I made in order to live like a husband while I was single, in order that I would be prepared when I was actually a husband. One of the first things I did was I saved money. Now, this is pretty easy for me because I'm a natural saver. But for some of you guys who get more pleasure out of spending money, this is going to be an act of discipline here in saving money. Why did I do this? Well, number one, I knew that my role and my responsibility as a man, even from the age of 13, although I wasn't married, but I knew eventually I would be, or by God's grace I would be, I knew that my role would be to provide for my wife. That brought a lot of anxiety to me, honestly, but it led me to say, okay, even now at 13 years old, when I make money, I'm going to spend some of it, I'm going to save some of it. I'm going to orient my life in such a way where I'm being responsible with it so that when I am older and actually of marriable age, that I will have a foundation, that we don't have to stress all the time, and I don't have to be like, yeah, I can't do this because, well, we can't get married because I just don't have enough money, or I'm trying to figure out things. And maybe you're at that stage in your life when you haven't prepared properly. I'm not saying that there's no hope for you, but I'm saying that in this moment now, this is where you begin. This is where you start being responsible with your finances because it matters. Maybe that means sacrificing some things, sacrificing eating out. Hey, I'm not going to eat out very often because I want to save, because I want to set myself up and my family up for financial success in the future. These might seem like small things to you, and a lot of guys will just be like, well, I'm single, I can spend all my money, it's just me, and they have no vision for the future. But that's what makes us different, because we are men on mission. And when we have a mission, we're going to make the sacrifices necessary to accomplish that mission. And you're going to make the choices that are necessary in order to love your wife even before you know her. I love being able to treat my wife now because I know when I was 19 or when I was 16 or when I was 21 that I didn't buy those things that I really wanted, or I didn't go on those trips because I wanted to bless my wife with that when I met her. That was my goal. That was my mission. Some guys choose differently, but that just brings me so much joy even now as I'm able to bless my wife, bless my family, bless other people around me, because I know I made the sacrifices early on to say no to those things. The second way that you can live like a husband even now is save yourself for marriage. Save your sexuality. Save sex for marriage. Now, maybe you have stumbled already. You have maybe had sex outside of marriage. Maybe it's pornography. Maybe it's masturbation. You haven't been pure. I want you to know that there's redemption and there is forgiveness in Jesus, but you need to come to a place of repentance. You need to stop pushing it to a corner. Maybe it's painful for you, but I want you to know that there is healing there, but you need to stop ignoring it. And the second that you bring somebody else into your life, that's all going to be stirred up too. And so if you're not dealing with it yourself, you need to know that it's going to come out eventually. And so, hey, come to terms with it. Say, okay, God, I need forgiveness here. I need healing here. And I'm going to commit myself to you. I'm going to commit myself to be set apart, not only because I love God, but I also love my future spouse. I want to love my future wife and say, hey, I'm going to turn away from these things. I'm going to turn away from pornography. I'm going to turn away from promiscuity. I'm going to turn away from lust because I love you. And that concept might seem a lot easier when you're married. It's easy to say, oh, of course you shouldn't look at another woman when you're married. Of course you shouldn't watch pornography when you're married. Of course you shouldn't sleep with somebody else when you're married. But that's why I'm bringing this concept of living like a husband even before you're married, because the truth is you shouldn't be looking at with lust when you're not married. You shouldn't be sleeping with a woman that you're not married to. You shouldn't be watching pornography even though you're not married. That still isn't good for you. That's still a sin against God, and that is still breaking the heart of your future wife, truly. Like, you're cheating on your future wife by doing that. And I just think that is so sad, and we want to push that away. We want to make the choices that we need to make now, and the sacrifices, in a sense, offering ourselves as living sacrifices to God, of saying, hey, I'm going to be set apart because I love my wife and I love you, God. Now, you need to recognize the other side to this is, if you choose not to live like a husband when you're not married, if you choose to live like a single person and be promiscuous, that eventually you're going to need to admit that to your wife or your spouse. And that's going to be really hard. And I don't want you to have to experience what that pain looks like and the pain that you're bringing on your spouse too. Now, maybe you've already sinned, you've already fallen in that area, and you're kind of dreading that conversation. We pray for grace and forgiveness and healing in those areas when you have to admit that to your future spouse. But the truth is, you can make the decisions now to not build on that. You can say, hey, when you meet your future wife, you can say, hey, I've demonstrated my love for you in how I have lived my life previously. How amazing is that? To say, hey, I've made these choices in my life. I've chosen not to go down these roads because I have loved you even before I knew you. Now, one of the other things that I did when I was single was I was cautious about the situations that I put myself in. Now, as a married man now, it's a lot easier to be like, okay, of course I'm not going to put myself in a one-on-one, dinner conversation with another woman, alone. Like, that's just dumb. We're not going to do that. But when you're single, well, of course you can do that. That's called a date. But the caveat to that is, if you have no intention of pursuing this person, then why are you putting yourself in that situation? Even bringing another woman into my apartment when I was single, it's like, that's not a super wise thing to do. So trying to be wise about the situations that you put yourself in, even when you're single. I was not perfect at this, along with a lot of other things I'm not perfect at. But I think it's important that you try to get this through, process this a little bit, because we're often flippant about the situations that we put ourselves in. We say, no, we can handle it. Oh, this doesn't tempt me. It's not a big deal. But if you're operating this way when you're single, think about when you get married. It's a lot easier to fall into those same patterns of thought, to say, oh, this doesn't tempt me. It's not a big deal. My wife shouldn't worry about this because I'm strong. It's okay. I can put myself in this situation. That's not a pattern of thinking that you want to get in the habit of doing. Now, you might not really have thought about this, but the other thing that I did was begin to set boundaries, especially with parents. As a single person, especially a single man, setting boundaries with parents, say, hey, you know what? You only have this much influence in my life. I want to honor you. I want to respect you. But at the same time, you're not making the decisions for my life. And I'm not kind of acting in a codependent relationship with you. I'm not on mom and dad's payroll all the time, and I'm not trying to get all my stuff from them, and I'm not, mooching off them. No, I'm beginning to establish independence. I'm beginning to work on my own things. Okay, I look to them for wisdom and whatever else. But that creates a transition when you do get married. It makes it a lot more smooth, because think about it. If you are totally enraptured with your parents and other people, whatever, there's no boundaries whatsoever. And maybe it's friends too, right? Like you just take their opinions and everything, and there's no boundaries. When you bring a wife in to the picture, all of a sudden, in a moment, you need to cut all these people out, or set all these boundaries. Not necessarily cut them out, but you need to set all these boundaries of saying, hey, you don't get to say, or I respect your opinion, but you're not the one that gets to make this decision. All that kind of thing. But if you were intentional about setting those boundaries earlier on, even in your single years, of saying, hey, you know what? We're not going to develop a codependent relationship here. I'm going to develop some independence. I respect your opinion. I'm going to respect you as a person, but you don't get to be doing this, and I'm not going to be dictated. My life's not going to be dictated by your every whim or your sporadic emotions and things like that. I'm going to set some boundaries, and that way, when you do bring a woman into the picture, there's just so much more clarity there, and saying, hey, similar to how we've been doing it before, once again, if you're treating her this way, we're not going to be hanging out. Or if you're, spouting your opinions, that's fine, but I'm not taking them as gospel. Now, the general idea with all this stuff is get your stuff together before you look for a wife. Before you bring a woman into the picture, get your stuff together. Don't just live as a flippant single man who just doesn't have his stuff together, because when you do bring somebody into the picture, right? This happens to a lot of guys. All of a sudden they wake up and they're like, what have I been doing with my life? And they're trying to get everything together so quickly and in a panic, and it's chaotic and it's stressful, and it just causes so much anxiety because you're trying to fix your life in this moment. Maybe financially, you get yourself on track, spiritually get yourself on track. Oh, I'm reading the Bible all of a sudden, even though I haven't done that in forever, because I really want this woman to be with me and I want to show her that I'm adequate and that I can lead her and all that kind of thing. I'm just like, hey, that's cool that even now, begin on this path so that when a woman does come in the picture, you can say, hey, you know what? I've been doing devotions for a couple of years. I know what this is like. This is not new for me. Oh, I've been going to the gym. I know what it's like to take care of my body. Oh, I've been saving. I've been investing. I've been working on this. So you don't need to worry about it. I got this under control. How gangster is that? How amazing is that when you as a man can say, I have it under control. I've been doing this. I've been leading my life in a way, preparing for this moment for a long time. This isn't a flippant decision for me. This is something I've been preparing my whole life for. I've been loving you through my actions even before I knew you. That's an amazing thing to be able to say. I hope you got something from this video. If you did, subscribe, because I'm putting out new videos all the time, and share this with another guy friend of yours who you think might benefit from this content. If you want to support what I'm doing and join the Brotherhood, subscribe on Patreon down below. We got bonus videos. We have a Discord. There's maybe a podcast coming out soon, perhaps some merch, all sorts of other stuff. It's very fun. So you want to join the Brotherhood, where we can encourage each other to lead and love well. Until next time, keep pursuing the mission.